So we had started the SUPSC guidelines in our previous lecture. What is the SUPSC? SUPSC, that is nothing but the scale up post approval changes. So once the product that had received the approval, after approval, if the manufacturer they has to carry out certain changes at some level. The level might be in the form of the ingredient, its quantity, change of ingredient, change of process of manufacturing, or either to scale up the process or to downstream the process. Whatever the change want to carry out, for that changes, the product has to go through the guidelines which was given by FDA, Food and Drug Administration, and these guidelines are called as SUPSC guidelines. So based on the changes, based on the severity, significance, and the intensity of changes, the three different levels of the changes are there. That is said to be the level 1, level 2, level 3, based on its significance, based on its severity at the formulation level. So all these are the details that already we had covered in our previous lecture. Now our today's SUPSC guidelines, these are in relation with that of the modified release kind of solid dosage form formulation. So just to have a revision, just to have a recap of the things that we saw, so that we can proceed with the SUPSC for the MR, that is a modified release. As you know that it is applicable for the NDA, that is the new drug application, and after getting approval, it will be subjected to the scale-up process in order to produce the large batch manufacturing. Some is the case associated with the generic drug product, which will undergo the bioequivalence studies to the FDA reference listed drugs. Then it is for the ANDA, that is the abbreviated new drug application and the abbreviated antibiotic drug application. Once these they will get approval, they will subject to the scale-up process in order to produce the large batch manufacturing. So what do these guidelines they will do? These guidelines they will provide the recommendations for the process of post approval changes. Now post approval changes in relation with what? Yes, very correct. In relation with the component, in relation with the composition, in relation with the site of manufacture, in relation with the scale up, scale down of the manufacture, and the manufacturing, that is the process of equipments, process and equipments of a modified release oral solid dosage form during the post approval period. So for all these SUPSC guidelines, they will work. Now there are different definitions based on the levels, that is level 1, level 2, level 3, and they has to comply with that of the compendial tests. Either that might be in the form of the in vitro dissolution, in vitro release, or in vivo release of the drug. And there is a need to file the details associated with these in the form of the documentation, that either might be annual reporting or the changes might be in the form of the supplements, the changes being effected supplement, and prior approval supplements. So the level 1 that will be properly defined as unlikely to have detectable impact. That means the changes that may not have its direct impact, or the impact may not be significant on the formulation. And the document, these are related with that of the stability, dissolution, and the bioequivalence. So the stability test, that first production batch on long-term stability data reported in annual reporting, and onto the dissolution documentation, they should meet with that of the compendial requirement. Compendial requirement, the official requirements which are mentioned into the official books like say the pharmacopoeias. For level 1, the bioequivalence documentation that is not required. And as far as the reporting is concerned, it is to be done annually, all information including long-term stability data. Long-term, it might be for the 3 months or to the 6 months. When it is said that it is the level 2, it will be clearly defined that it will be having a significant impact onto the formulation. And if this is the case, then the documentation which is needed, that is in the form of the stability, dissolution, and the bioequivalence. So again, bioequivalence document that is not needed in case of the level 2. So the for dissolution, extended release, the multi-point dissolution profiles should be obtained in 3 other media, and adequate sampling that should be performed thereafter until either 80% of the drug from the drug product is released or an asymptom is reached. If the formulation type is a delayed release one, in that case the dissolution test should be performed in acid stage, buffer stage under standard test conditions, and 2 additional agitation speeds using the application using apparatus 1 and 2 that should be carried out. Adequate sampling that should be performed thereafter until either 80% of the drug from the drug product is released or an asymptom is reached. If it is the level 2, then the filing that need to be done in the form of the supplement, that is the prior approval supplement and the annual reporting. So the changes being effected, that is said to be the CBE, changes being effected, CBE. It is known as the CBE document. The changes being effected supplement that will provide all information including accelerated stability data, annual report, and the long-term stability data. So this is related with that of the level 2. Now, if the changes that are of the level 3 type, now how the level 3 that will be defined, it will be defined in such a way that if the changes they will having a significant impact on formulation affecting all therapeutic ranges of the drug, that means it will affect the prescription. So the documents these are needed in terms of stability, dissolution, and the bioequivalence. Here bioequivalence document is required, whereas in case of level 1 and level 2 the bioequivalence study bioequivalence document that is not required. So the stability, the 3 batches with 3 months accelerated stability data reported in post-approval supplement, and long-term stability data of first 3 production batches that should be reported in the annual reporting. As far as dissolution documentation is concerned, it is same as in level 2. And for bioequivalence documentation, a single dose bioequivalence study is required. A bioequivalence study that may be waived in the presence of an established in vitro and in vivo correlation. Waived means it is skip off. Changes in release controlling excipients in formulation should be within the range of release controlling excipients of the established correlation. Now, if it is the level 3, the filing that should be prior approval supplement and the annual reporting. So prior approval supplements all information including accelerated stability data and annual report in the form of the long-term stability data. These has to be carried out. Now components and the composition, that means all these are related with that of, yes, anyone? These are related with that of the excipients, non-release controlling excipients. Here particularly for modified release, solid oral dosage forms, consideration should be given as to whether the excipient is critical or not critical to drug release. That means changes into the excipient, whether it will be affecting onto the drug release characteristics or not. If it is critical, then again the care has to be taken. The sponsor should provide appropriate justification for claiming any excipients as a non-release controlling excipient in the formulation of the modified release solid oral dosage form. The functionality of each excipient that should be identified, and the changes in the amount of drug substance are not addressed by this guideline. So any change related with that of the amount that will not be addressed by this particular guideline. as far as the components and the composition is concerned. Only the change related with that of the excipient and its importance, its significance in the form of the critical and non-critical effect onto the drug release, that is most important one. So in case of level 1, as already we discussed in our previous lecture 2, so the same is applicable for modified release also. So what is permissible limit, that is either less than or equal to the values of the individual ingredients. So if it is the filler, it is plus or minus 5 or less than that. If it is the disintegrant, like say starch, others and binders, it should be in the form of less than or equal to 3, less than or equal to 1, less than or equal to 0.5. In case of the lubricants, for the lubricants such as calcium, magnesium, stearate and other, it is respectively plus or minus 0.25 and plus or minus 1. In case of glidants, for the glidants like talc, it is in the form of the less than or equal to 1. If it is others 1, it is less than or equal to 0.1, and for film coating, it is less than or equal to 1. So for level 2, again, all these we already saw in our previous lecture. So at level 2, you can see that whatever the values these are there for level 1, in case of level 2, the values are totally doubled one. So that should be either equal to or less than that of the double the value which has given in case of the level 2, right? So this is for the level 2. And for level 3, the level 3, that will be having its significant impact onto the formulation quality, performance and the prescription. So this is of most important, which will require the bioequivalence documentation related with the bioequivalence studies. Now here the release controlling excipients, the focus that should be onto the changes in the release controlling excipients in case of the modified oral solid dosage forms. The criticalness of the excipients, that is important one, the functionality of each excipient that should be identified, and the changes in the amount of the drug substance that are not addressed by this guidance. Changes exceeding the ranges defined may be allowed if considered to be within normal batch to batch variation and contained within an approved original application. If we want to consider the release controlling components and the composition, so these are again classified based on the levels, level 1, level 2, level 3, and the classification that is in the form of the type of the drug, what is their therapeutic range, and if this is the case, what kind of documentation is required and what kind of filing is required. In case of level 1, if it is less than or equal to 5% weight by weight change based on the total excipient contained, then this is applicable to all types of drugs. And here the test documentation that will require the stability data, meeting with the compendial requirement, and the bio study that is not required at level 1. Reporting that is annually. For level 2, if the changes in technical grade and or specifications, these are double than that of the level 1, or it is less than that of the 10% of the weight by weight change based on the total excipient contents. And this is applicable to the narrow therapeutic range as well as for the non-narrow therapeutic range. Now you can see the difference between the narrow therapeutic range and the non-narrow therapeutic range. If it is the non-narrow therapeutic range, the bioequivalence documentation that is required. In case of the narrow equivalence range, again it is the required one. In non-narrow, you can see the dissolution documentation that is based on the type of particular formulation, whether it is extended release or whether it is delayed release. And the filing that should be supplementary. In case of level 3, if it is more than that of the 10% of the weight by weight change based on total excipient content, this is applicable to all kinds of drugs which will be having the therapeutic range, which will require the bio study, which will require the updated batch record and stability data as well as the profile requirements. And they will require the prior approval supplement. So in case of modified release oral solid dosage form, if it is the site change of manufacturing, what are the guidelines? The site change consists of changes in location of the site of manufacture, packaging operations, and or analytical testing laboratory. It do not include any scale-up changes in manufacturing, including process and or equipment, or changes in components or composition. It should have had a satisfactory current good manufacturing practices inspections. The facility should also have a current and satisfactory CGMP compliance profiles with the FDA for the type of packaging operations in question before submitting the supplements. If it is the site change, what are the different levels, how these are classified, what test documents are required, and what is the filing procedure. At level 1, the classification that is based on the changes into the facility. If it is a single facility, if it is the personnel related, and if no other changes are required, then in such case, it should meet with that of the compendial requirement, which do not require any kind of bio study, and the reporting that should be annually. In case of level 2, it is associated with the same contiguous campus, no common personnel, and no other changes are required. So the test documentation that will include identification and description of site change, updated batch record, notification of site change, resolution documentation, extended release, delayed release, and no biostudy is required. So the changes being effected, supplement. So the date onto which the changes that are carried out. Level 3 is applicable to the different campuses for the different personnels. The kind of classification is concerned, and the test document which are required at level 3 in case of the modified release solid dosage forms, the notification of site change, updated batch record, stability, application compatible requirement, and the biostudy is required. So if you have just a overlook, biostudy that is required at level 3. So the reporting that will be prior approval supplement. Now, if any changes are needed in case of the batch size, either the batch should be subjected to the scale up or to the scale down, what the guidelines are. The post-approval changes in the size of the batch from the pivotal or pilot scale bio batch material to larger or smaller production batches call for submission of additional information to the inspection, to the application. The scale down below 1 lakh dosage units is not covered by this guideline. So it covers the more than 1 lakh. Adjustment in parameters such as mixing times and speeds may be made to tailor the process to the characteristics of larger or smaller scale up equipment. Tailor, the meaning is that is based on the requirement. All scale up changes that should be properly validated and where needed inspected by appropriate agency personnel. If it is needed, some outsourcing agencies are appointed in order to validate and in order to confirm and ensure the quality. Now changes in batch size, scale up and scale down, it will consist of the 2 different levels, level 1, level 2, its classification, the changes and the documentation and filing procedure. So for change 1 or the level 1, the change in the batch size, the classification is based on the scale up of the bio batches of the pivotal clinical batches and no other change is required. And the change is less than or equal to 10 times. Test documentation, that is updated batch record related with the stability, application and the compendial requirements. No biostudy is required. Reporting is annually. In case of level 2, for the batch size changes, if it is the scale up of the bio batches of pivotal clinical batches and no other change is required, and the size is larger one, that is larger than that of the 10 times, then in this case the updated batch record, stability, dissolution documentation related with the extended release, delayed release is required along with the bioequivalence documentation. And the reporting, the filing, that should be CBE, that is the change being effected, the date onto which the changes that are carried out, the filing should be made on the same date. Manufacturing equipments, if we want to carry out certain changes related with the equipments which are involved in the process of manufacturing, the guidelines will suggest that the manufacturing changes may involve the equipment used in the manufacturing processes, that is the critical manufacturing variable. If a manufacturer wishes to use manufacturing equipment that is not identical in every respect to the original manufacturing equipment used in the approved application, appropriate validation studies should be conducted to demonstrate that the new equipment is similar to the original one. So this means that if the equipment we are going on changing, that means the functionality should not be affected, the effectiveness should not be affected. So just if we want to increase the productivity, if we are changing and if it is not going to be affecting any kind of functioning, then it is acceptable. For modified release solid dosage forms, consideration should be given as to whether or not the changes in manufacturing equipment is critical to the drug release. That is the critical equipment variable. So the changes that are in relation with that of the two different levels, level 1, level 2, and the classification is based on the equipment changes and no other changes, whereas the changes what are permitted that are mentioned into the changes and what the documentation is required and what the filing time. So if it is the level 1 which will require the equipment change, so the change which is there, that is important in this. So the change that is associated with the alternate equipment of same design and principle and the automated equipments, these will fall under the level 1. We require the documentation, updated batch record, stability, application compendial requirement, no biostudy is required. Reporting is annually. If it is the level 2, same equipment change, but the changes that are to equipment of different design and the operating principle. If the design is going to be changed, instead of blender, V-shaped blender, if the another shaped blender that is going to be used, that is the design change. So the test documentation which is required, that is the updated batch record, stability, dissolution documentation associated with the extended release and the delayed release. In case of level 2, the bioequivalence documentation is required and the reporting that should be with effect from the changes. If the manufacturing process, these are going to be needing changes, then in that case, the guidelines will say that if a manufacturer wishes to use a manufacturing process that is not identical in every aspect, in every respect to the original manufacturing process used in the approved application, appropriate validation studies should be conducted to demonstrate that the new process is similar to the original process. If the changes has to be done, and if these are not in relation with the already approved one, then in that case the study need to be demonstrated, which will clearly indicate that the new process they are giving the same effect, the same reports and the same processes. For modified release solid oral dosage forms, consideration should be given as to whether or not the change in manufacturing process is critical to drug release. Whatever the changes has been carried out, if the changes are not affecting the process of the drug release, that is acceptable. If it is affecting the drug release, again, that may not be permitted in case of the SUPAC guidelines. For purposes of categorizing the level of changes, process change may be considered only to affect a release controlling excipients when both type of excipients are present during the unit operation undergoing a change. So here the three different levels had been given when the case is related with the manufacturing process and its changes. So there are differences into the classification, the test documentation which is required, and the process of filing. So if you just have a look over onto all these, generally in case of level 1 annual reporting, level 2 it is the CBE reporting in the form of the supplement, and level 3 that is the prior approval supplement. So for manufacturing process, in case of level 1, the classification that is related with the adjustment of the equipment operating conditions within the approved ranges, for which we require the updated batch record application, compendial requirement, no biostudy. For level 2, the classification is adjustment of the equipment operating conditions within the approved changes, and the test documentation that is related with the chemistry, that is related with the stability, that is related with the dissolution stage in the form of the extended and the delayed release, which do not require the biostudy. For level 3, the changes in the process or the type of processes that is used, and the test documentation is required, that is the updated batch record, stability, application compatible requirement, and the biostudy as usual. In case of level 3, we require the biostudy. So in order to understand all these, so this is just a brief overview related with all. Now from where these are taken, so these are taken from the document which is available on the FDA website. So this is the guidance for the industry related with the SUPSC MR, that is the modified release solid oral dosage forms. So you can see that it will consist of all the guidelines. The guidelines, these are related with the components, composition, in different level, the release controlling, excipients, the site change, the batch change, and the manufacturing equipment change along with the process change. So all these, it will contain the detailed information related with this. If you want, you can go through these also. I will provide this as a study material along with my slides. So this is what is all about the SUPSC guideline. These are related with that of the modified release. That is the guidance for the industry for scale-up post-approval changes related with the modified release. So with this, we will stop at this particular point only. Thank you very much. Have a good day to all of you, and stay safe, stay at home.